Good morning, good morning. All right. So, LDS stories of faith and courage. And we are on the story of old Bruno by Joseph J. Porter, Forest Ranger. This is an exciting story of the depredations of a grizzly bear, old Bruno, in the Escalante Mountains, and the efforts that were made to destroy him. Now, normally we don't talk about Bruno, but this is a good story. I had to throw that in there. I know it was stupid, but anyway. Here we go. For a number of years, an old grizzly bear roamed over the Escalante Mountain, killing stock wherever he went, and terrorizing everyone he met. Cowboys, forest rangers, campers, in fact, everyone who rode over the mountain were on the alert for old Bruno, hoping some time to meet up with him and get in a fatal shot. Every camper on returning for the night slept, as the old saying is, with one eye open, watching for old Bruno, that he might not call on them when they were asleep. But finally the time came that he did catch two forest rangers asleep in their tent. These rangers were Ambrose Schurz and myself. They had planned a trip around in the head of North Creek, where they were to meet at a certain date, before going to Escalante after supplies. After having been out in his district for about 2 weeks, Ranger Schurz arrived. While coming in, he passed the Willow Bottom Reservoir, which was located at the head of Twitchell Creek, a branch of North Creek. The reservoir was full and the dam was about to break. But he went on down the creek and selected a nice place to camp in a grassy flat by some willows where a ranch, or rather a dairy, was once located. He hobbled his horses out on the grass, pitched his tent, and got a camp fixed up in fine shape when Ranger Porter rolled in about 3 p.m. They had a little chat in the luncheon and decided to go down to the brook and catch a mess of trout to take home the next day. After fixing up the fishing tackle, they went down to the brook and returned to camp in a couple of hours, each with a nice string of trout. By this time, it was dark and had begun to rain, so the saddles were piled and the guns strapped onto them at the foot of the bed to keep them out of the wet. The rangers sat on the bed talking about their luck catching trout and their trip through the districts and about the weather. During this time, they had been cleaning the trout, and they had just finished. The refuse from the fish was thrown just outside of the tent door, and the trout were placed just inside the tent. I'll make comments at the end of the story, but if you can't tell, you can see I have words to say about this. The rangers waited for some time for the rain to cease so they could build a campfire and prepare some supper. But it continued to pour down, so they decided to go to bed without eating. Just before retiring for the night, Ranger Porter stepped to the tent door and, on looking around, said, "I'd like to see old Bruno step out on the flat." "Why?" asked Ranger Schurz. "Oh," Porter answered, "so I could get on him and take a ride," and laughed. Porter soon fell asleep. Now remember, Porter is the one who is writing the story, by the way. Porter soon fell asleep. A short time after Schurz awakened Porter and wanted to move the camp up on the side of the hill, he'd been thinking about the reservoir at the head of the creek and thought it would break the dam and come down the canyon and wash them away. After talking hard, Porter convinced Schurz that they would hear it coming and would have time to move before it reached them, in case the dam broke. Porter was soon asleep again. But it was not long until Schurz awakened him. Porter asked, "What in the world was wrong with you? Have you the Jim Jams?" Schurz says there was nothing wrong with him, only that he couldn't go to sleep. "Something has knocked the guy ropes from the tent and let it fall into my face, and I'm going to fix it," he added. Porter advised him to tuck the tent down around the bed and not go out in the wet, as he might catch cold. "But for goodness sake, let me go to sleep." Then they lay down again, and Porter was soon asleep, for he was tired from his long day's ride over the range. In just a few minutes, Shirts gave Porter a sharp poke in the ribs and exclaimed, "Porter, for heaven's sakes, look at that big bear!" Porter opened his eyes, and there stood the big grizzly, about a third of the way into the tent. Porter covered up his head and thought of all the mean things he had ever done, while Shirts was trying to crawl under him. "Here, don't crowd me out of bed," he said, and then got up courage enough to peek from under the covers. There stood old Bruno calmly eating up the fish and looking around at the Rangers. The men lay very still and watched him. After eating all the fish, he lapped out the dish and licked his chops with his long tongue, and then looked down at the Rangers as if to say, "Lie still, I am boss here." There was nothing for the men to do but lie still. The bear was so near that Porter could have reached out and touched him with his fingers. Shirts had a quarter of mutton hanging on a tent pole. And the old bear would look at it and then back at the Rangers. Shirts said, "Porter, is he going to get my mutton? What shall I do?" Porter replied, "Well, let him have it." I am not going to try to stop him." Apparently, the bear had only come for something to eat and began to move off slowly. He had no sooner started than the Rangers jumped for their guns, but Porter could not find his gun and was rummaging frantically for it. "Why, you should have a hold of it now. Pull it out," Shirts shouted. Porter must have been some rattled. Bruno had gone about 20 yards when the Rangers fired. With a growl and a jump, he was gone. The shots had missed their mark. The Rangers sat in the tent a while talking about the adventure. Shirts asked, "Porter, why didn't you ride him?" Porter replied, "I couldn't find my spurs." They went to bed, but they confessed they didn't sleep much for the fear of old Bruno coming back. Early in the morning, the Rangers went out to see if they had hit the bear, but could find no trace of any blood. They tracked him across the creek and saw where he had sat down, scratched around in the dirt, and then gone out through the timber. The Rangers went back to camp, got breakfast, wrangled their horses, put on their packs, and started for Escalante, feeling sorry about the loss of the fish, but the fact that they had missed old Bruno, but glad they were alive. After traveling about 20 miles down North Creek, the Rangers came to Escalante, a town of approximately 1,110 people. A big baseball game was on, so after taking care of their outfits, the Rangers, of course, went to see the game. They told of their experience with old Bruno, which caused quite the sensation in the crowd, and they gathered round to hear the story. The crowd listened with great interest until the story was finished, and each began to express his opinion and tell what he would have done under the same circumstances. Ah, yes, the great tradition of armchair quarterbacking. One man in particular, Ranger Shirts' brother, Don C. Shirts, said if he had been there, he would have had old Bruno's pelt hanging on a fence now. Others said they would have thrown a blanket over his head and then cut his throat with a knife. Some said they would have shouted and given a jump at him, and in that case he would have broken his neck to get away. But one old bear hunter said that the Rangers had done the right thing by keeping still and not bothering him. If they had bothered him, the bear would have killed them. The Rangers felt the old hunter was right, as the bear didn't look to them as if he was a coward. Mr. Don C. Schultz seemed the most anxious to get a shot at old Bruno, so Ranger Porter told him that he was going back in a few days and would like to have him go along. Mr. Shirts was going on the mountain to take a load of salt for his cattle, and if Mr. Porter would go around with him, he would go with Porter and get the bear, and the plan was agreed upon. Mr. Shirts was one of the first settlers of Escalante, is a good marksman, and quite a sport. After getting their supplies and outfit ready, Mr. Shirts and Mr. Porter left Escalante. Mr. Shirts and Mr. Porter left Escalante about 10 o'clock one morning, going up the right hand of the fork of North Creek. After a day's travel, they camped at the hog ranch where Mr. Shirts' cattle were located. The salt was put out for the cattle, camp prepared, and they sat down to supper. While they were eating, Mr. Schurz said, "Sit still. Do not move." Porter did not know what was up. Schurz raised his gun and fired. Lo and behold, there was a fine big buck deer passing by. As it was dark, the shot missed its mark, and the deer got off free. The hunters soon retired for the uneventful night. The next morning, Mr. Schurz got breakfast while Mr. Porter wrangled the horses and packed up. So they were soon on their journey. After a few hours' ride, they came to the spot where old Bruno gave the rangers the scare. They pitched their tent, took care of their horses, and were soon down the creek catching a mess of trout for supper. They returned in a couple of hours with a nice string of trout, which they soon had frying over the campfire. These men thought that they would eat the fish before old Bruno had a chance at them. Porter showed Schurz where they had the experience with the bear. Schurz sized up the situation and made the remark that they would get him tonight if he came. After sitting around the campfire for a while talking about the topics of the times, they went to bed to wait the results. Mr. Porter, thinking Mr. Schurz would want the best position, suggested Schurz sleep at the front of the bed. But he declined, saying he would not sleep on the side next to the tent door for $1,000. Mr. Schurz began to show signs of cold feet, and was not half so brave when it came to the real thing. Porter had to take the front of the bed. In a short time, Schurz was asleep and snoring. Porter lay there awake for probably 2 hours, when suddenly he heard the underbrush begin to crackle. Something came down the side hill. He listened, thinking perhaps it might be one of the horses coming into camp. All at once he heard a growl. He gave Schurz a poke in the ribs and exclaimed, "There's old Bruno." Schurz raised up in bed, grabbing his gun, and said, "Gee, where is he?" and began to work up the lever of his gun and threw all the cartridges out upon the ground. Being awakened so quickly, he did not know what he was doing. Then the clicking of the gun alarmed the bear, and Porter heard him hurry off up the mountainside. Next morning, bright and early, Mr. Schurz went out to see where the bear had been. He thought Porter had been just there to try to fool him. In a moment, Schurz called him from the back of the tent. "Porter, come here quick and look." Porter went, and there were old Bruno's tracks where he had come up behind the tent, then whirled and ran. Mr. Schurz said, "Now, Mr. Porter, if you won't tell this on me, I'll give you the best cow I own." Porter thought it was too good to keep, so when they got to town, he sprang the story, and the fellows gave Schurz the laugh. Even the little boys would holler at him and ask if he had old Bruno's pelt hanging on the fence. After Don Schurz had told the experience he had had with old Bruno, Mr. Andrew Morton and Mr. Ben Tanner decided they were the ones to get him, and pledged themselves to each other they would stay on old Bruno's trail until he was brought to justice. After equipping themselves with special guns, revolvers, butcher knives, traps, and pack outfit, they started out with brave hearts to find old Bruno's trail. Not long after reaching the mountain, they found fresh signs where the old bear had been. They started in pursuit, thinking every moment they would overtake their prey. But like the others, who had sworn vengeance on old Bruno, they camped on his trails for days and for weeks, old Bruno giving them the slip every time. They trailed him back and forth from Canyon Mountain to the east end of the Boulder Mountain, a distance of about 150 miles, setting traps on his trail, but old Bruno continued to evade them. Finally, they located a place along the trail where the bear would always go through between two huge rocks at the point of the ledge. They decided to set a gun for him, with a string attached to the trigger, so when the bear came along and struck the string, it would set off the gun and kill him. After setting the gun and getting everywhere fixed in proper shape, they went back to another part of the range to wait results. A few days later, they returned to see what had happened, or rather to see what success they had from the snare. There had been a great mix-up. Old Bruno had run into the snare and received the full content of the gun, and had torn things up until the place looked as if a cyclone had struck it. But Bruno had made his escape. The hunters trailed him for about 60 miles, and although his tracks showed that he was traveling on 3 legs, they could not overtake him. They decided to go to Escalante for supplies and take up the trail again later. However, they were away, a storm came up, and when they returned, the old bear's tracks had been entirely obliterated. They said that while they had been on the old bear's trail, they found where he had killed 38 head of cattle in 10 days. Being wounded, old Bruno did not show up for some time. The time finally came when old Bruno hit the dust in the spring of 1916. Mr. Reuben Jolly and Mr. Chess Riddle from Coyote went out on the West Mountain to look for their stock. About 7 miles from town, they ran into the old outlaw. A fierce fight was soon on. The boys were well armed and began to shoot. The bear took after them, but the boys stood their ground for a while until he got too close for comfort. They brought him to the ground several times, but old Bruno would rally and come back again. After chasing back and forth through the timber and rocks for about 3 hours, the fatal shot was fired that put old Bruno to the bad. After taking his pelt, they made an examination and discovered that they had shot him about 30 times. He weighed 1,400 pounds and was very fat. If he was very fat in the spring, either he had been eating a lot or he was just very fat. Mr. Jolly and Mr. Riddle were lucky, as the stockman had offered a reward of $500 for old Bruno, which was soon paid. Mr. Riddle of Coyote had the old bear's pelt tanned and is using it for a rug. It is a fine specimen to see. Now, when anyone goes out on the mountain, he can lie down and sleep without having any fear of the old outlaw bothering him. There are a great many other circumstances that could be mentioned about old Bruno, but thinking perhaps you are tired and you were tired reading this kind of history will bring my story to a close. Okay, time for my comments on this one. Holy crap! Okay, in Boy Scouts, like, we'd go up in the Uintas because we got scout camps up there, and we were always taught, you know, you got to take care of your food properly, and you got to have, like, bear bags or bear-proof boxes or other things like that. You'd never want to leave smelly food out, like, ever. And so here they are, like, cleaning their fish and throwing the fish entrails right outside their tent, having their food right inside their tent. I'm like, this is what made me just go, because, good golly, you don't want to do that. It's like a recipe for bear. And boy, howdy did it work. Wow. I do like how all the guys had such bravado until they actually had to go up against themselves. And the only one who was like, no, you did the right thing, was the old hunter, who was like, yeah, I've hunted bear and, you know, trying not to make a big scene, otherwise he'd kill you. Think of that. 1,400 pounds. 1,400 pounds of just absolute behemoth meat. 30 times it took for them to take the bear down. I mean, wow. Like, at first I was like, oh, this is kind of crazy. Whoa, you know, that bear doesn't sound so bad. He's really huge, though. I mean, it is a grizzly. But yeah, the 38 cattle in 10 days. I'm like, that's a lot of destruction. That is a problem. Plus, also, this is the second time the bear visited them after taking care of trout on that stream. Again, half the problem is the people. Half the problem is the animal getting accustomed to the people. Because in the end, the bear is like, well, hey, here's easy food, and these guys in these tents, well, just provided me wonderful food. And frankly, they did, and that's half the problem. And the other half is him getting used to it, and him being master there. It's just, blah, blah. So, bear stories for myself. Thankfully, I've had 2 personal stories with bears, and my children have had another. I think 2 others, actually. My wife and children. So, on a trail, I was hiking with all my, well, not all my family, but some of my family, some of my siblings, and some of my friends. And one of my friends, it was just kind of an easy hike, beautiful view. We were on our way back down. It was kind of spring somewhere and such, and my friend he'd gone up ahead, and my wife and I were coming up after him, and he came back, and he had this wide look in his eyes, and he was you could tell he was unnerved. I'd love to embellish and say he was shaking from head to his boots, but he wasn't. He was just unnerved, and that we were like, what is going on? And he basically said, "Did you see the bear?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "Yeah, like this bear crossed right in front of me, and it could have easily just eaten me for lunch," kind of thing. He didn't quite say that, but it crossed right in front of him. And from then on, he decided that it'd be good for him to be armed whenever he went hiking. I mean, you have a close encounter with a bear, and you suddenly realize how mortal you really are. For me, my experience with a bear was actually after I had gone to my mission in San Diego. My parents decided, hey, let's go back down and visit all these places in San Diego, and I could show them around to these different spots that I'd been and served, and it was really fun. But we also went to the national parks in California, so back to the Redwoods and Yosemite, and camping right in between the two. So it was definitely very, very much spring. We cramped right between the two, and when we woke up, we were packing up, and a family of black bears decided to visit right around the spot we were in, and so we got to see them nice and far off, and of course we were just sitting here smacking our foreheads at the people who were all trying to get out of their cars and take photographs of the bears, and because it's like, I'm sorry, I mean, most times, most tourists, it's already pretty stupid to take pictures of bison and other things in the Yellowstone when they can get so close, because in a moment's notice they can turn around and gore you. And how ridiculously close sometimes they get is really unnervingly stupid. But what makes this worse is it was bears. So those are my two personal stories. One of the others is my family was down among the Red Rock country of Utah for a time, in a little place between Moab and Monticello. And there's the La Salle Mountains. They're not big range of mountains, but they're there. And apparently there's some brown bear or black bear, so not grizzly, but there's probably a she bear up there somewhere. And she'd have a couple of cubs, she'd raise them, but then she'd have to run them off, because, you got to keep up your territory. Well, running them off meant that they would run off to different places, and all around is kind of like Red Rock and Canyon country. And twice in the time that they were down there, they lived in an area that had a bunch of sandstone caves, and the community had been able to build into these kind of sandstone area. And so up on top of the rock, sandstone sometimes just has these natural divots. And a bear had gotten in one of these natural divots, and it couldn't get out. And the men of the community found the bear there. It had tried climbing up the sandstone so much it had worn down its claws completely. And it was a younger bear. And so it was exhausted by the time they found it. So these guys had to get down there, give it a bear hug, and lift it out and kind of like, all right, go off on your own and good luck, because now you have a bear who's young and experienced going out into country that doesn't seem like it has much to feed on without its claws. A second time they had to do that as well, I think a different year, and they basically put down a ladder for the bear, and I think it got the point and was able to get out. I can't remember the specifics of the story, but happened twice. So there you go. So moral of the story, take care of your food properly when you're in the wilderness. Don't tempt fate and lay down the gauntlet to Heavenly Father and be like, here, I'd love to see old Bruno. I'd like to ride him. And he's like, oh, would you? Let's see. Jeez Louise. 1,400-pound bear. I mean, think about it. Okay, if you have a grown man who's like, let's just say 200 for easy math. A grown man of 200 pounds. Oh, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Okay, 5. That is the weight of 7 men. 7 men. 30 bullets into the bear. And 3 hours of chase to take him down. Ugh. Anyway. Yeah. Grizzly bears are powerful. Do not mess with a bear. All right, my introduction to Mormonism by Francis A. Hammond. An immigrant from the Hawaiian Islands deftly prints a word picture of the saints and their trials during the winter of 1848 to 49 in Salt Lake Valley. So remember, they first arrived in 1847, the days of 47. So this is just one year after? Yeah, 48 to 49, that winter. 2 year? 1.5 year? So 1.5 years after the pioneers first arrived. So however much you could build up in that time. And starting out with the wagon company from California, I had some experience which was quite new to me. That was managing and driving 4 yoke of oxen. The first day out, I managed to upset the whole load of goods from my wagon while passing a dug way on a side hill. This accident caused me to doubt my ability as a teamster, and I supposed the voyage was up. And we sailors usually think that the voyage is about ended when the ship is capsized. However, the boys came to my assistance, and with their experience and strong arms, soon had my wagon righted up and the goods replaced, and not much damage was done. This mishap tended to lessen my self-confidence in managing my team, and I made arrangements with Timothy Hoyt to buy my wagon and oxen and haul my goods for me. I rigged up some pack animals and joined the pack company. So I parted with the wagon company and took the trail ahead of them. We had not traveled but a day or two on the trail marked out by our pioneer brethren, who, when we met some Indians dressed in some of the clothing belonging to the brethren who were ahead looking out the road. We soon came to the spot where our 3 pioneers had been murdered by the Indians. It was near a beautiful little spring in the midst of a heavy growth of fine timber. Signs of a fearful struggle were apparent, and the brethren fought for their lives. The Indians must have crept on them while they were asleep and attacked them, perhaps with their own arms. A buckskin purse, well filled with gold, was found lying on the ground. We buried the bodies as decently as circumstances would permit, and a rude inscription was placed on the spot to tell the sad tale. This sad accident caused a deep gloom and to rest upon our whole camp. It served to make us more than ever watchful and vigilant. We traveled on pioneering to our own road and rest. Sorry, I'm just thinking about that. We traveled on pioneering our own road the rest of the way over the Sierra Nevada mountains. I remember we traveled a goodly portion of one day on snow as we made the summit. We finally made the pass and descended down into Carson Valley and on to Truckee River, where we rested ourselves and animals for a short time, for we now had a stretch of country of 90 miles across to the Humboldt River, a desert without water, and but very little feed. While resting there, we saw a few Indians lurking around inside of our camp, but did not venture in. We filled our water in canteens about 3 p.m., left our camp on Truckee River, and took the trail for Humboldt. At about midnight, we came to where our trail led through a rocky pass. And as we reached about midway of the pass, there came a shower of arrows from both sides of the trail. The Indians had preceded us and ambushed here, in this spot where we were obliged to pass, with the intention of robbing us of animals and outfit. We put spur to our horses and rushed the pack animals and horses ahead of us with all the speed possible, at our command, while the arrows flew in our train as thick as hail, and continued till we were out of reach. One large horse belonging to W.M. Muir was killed, and a few others were slightly wounded. This was all the harm we received. Not a man was touched by an arrow. We felt to thank the Lord for our deliverance from what seemed imminent danger. I'd say so. We rode on without any further molestation during the night, and about 10 o'clock the next morning we reached the running water on the Humboldt River. Our poor animals were so thirsty that we could not keep them from rushing into the river with their packs on, so eager were they to quench their thirst. We had been so much longer on our journey than expected that our provisions were running very short. We were reduced to hard, dried, jerked beef with a little gravy made with flour and water. One day, late in the afternoon, while traveling up the Humboldt, I was ahead of the train looking out for a camping place when I came upon an old campground. Here I espied a wolf. He ran off a few hundred yards and turned around to look at me. I drew up my old U.S. Yager rifle and fired at his wolfship. He was wounded in his shoulder. I left my horse and ran for him as I came up with him. He turned on his haunches and snarled at me. I took my gun and clubbed him on the head and broke the stock of my gun. I returned to camp, dragging my game by the tail, as proud as Nimrod over my achievement. But oh, how the boys laughed at me when they learned I'd broken my gun stock. They said I should have reloaded and finished my game with another shot. He was the first game ever killed by my shooting. The wolf was soon skinned and dressed, and we were so hungry for fresh meat that he was soon disposed of by broiling and roasting him on the coals. I've eaten a great many different kind of animals, but of all that I have ever tried, that wolf was the far worst. I can almost taste him, yet as I think of it. We continued our journey without anything worthy of note till about the 1st of September, 1848, when we arrived at Ogden. Here we obtained some fresh provisions from Captain James Brown and a mountaineer by the name of Goodyear. From Ogden, we followed an Indian trail which led us in direct route from Heights Point to the hot springs. The Great Salt Lake now covers miles of the route we traveled. On the 6th day of September, 1848, we arrived in Great Salt Lake City. I remember thinking the name was much larger than the city, which consisted of 3 mud forts called North, South, and Middle Forts, enclosing 10 acres in each fort. If my memory is not at fault, the saints who had emigrated from the east, a few from the west, were all located inside these forts or enclosures, probably in round numbers not exceeding 1,500 souls. I now arrived. Wow. He was there at the start. I had no idea about this. Wow. I had now arrived in Zion, where I desired to make my home. The country was very forbidding in appearance and looked as though we would not have much to live on, but religion and faith. I had a testimony that the Lord had not brought his people into the land to be starved to death, and I had implicit confidence in the words of the leaders of the people, Brigham Young and the apostles. Oh, dude, I have words about this. This is going to be good. On my trip from California, I met Brother Collins, the cook on the ship Brooklyn. He'd been to Salt Lake and was returning to California. He gave me a note of introduction to Brother Levi E. Ritter, living in the South Fort. He had, as he had boarded there during his stay. Accordingly, I called and found Brother Ritter had gone to California to recover goods he had sent in the ship Brooklyn. Sister Rebecca Ritter received me very kindly and consented to have me board there and make my home for the present with them. I was very grateful for this kind reception, as I was an entire stranger, having no blood kin in the church that I knew of, and yet I soon felt as much at home as though in my own father's house. On the 20th of September, 1848, President Brigham Young and company arrived in the valley from winter quarters. I sought to obtain an introduction to him and was profoundly impressed with his appearance. Never did a man make such an impression upon me as he did, and I was more than willing to accept him as the great leader and prophet and counselor to the people of God. This testimony has never wavered in the least from that day to the present. I had a great desire to make the acquaintance of Apostle Parley P. Pratt, for I reverenced him as my father in the gospel on the account of the voice of warning, which had much to do in converting me to the faith. Brother John Van Cott used to visit frequently at Brother Ritter and I's was introduced to him. I soon came to esteem Brother Van Cott very highly for his many virtues and strict honesty and unflinching fidelity to the cause of truth. One afternoon, soon after my arrival, I dressed myself up in my best bib and tucker, and Brother Van Cott took me up to introduce me to the Apostle Parley P. Pratt. We found him threshing beans before his door, with a wagon box with sides turned down for a floor. He was barefooted in his shirt sleeves, and wore a homemade straw hat with brim nearly separated from the crown, and his ears protruding between the crown and the brim of his hat. I must confess I was a good deal surprised to find my ideal apostle for such a plight and forced to labor in such a manner for his support, for I had the old sectarian idea about the grave and reverend appearance of prophets and apostles who had little, if anything, to do with secular or temporal affairs. With such views, I could hardly receive Brother Pratt as the man who wrote so many inspired books. In introducing me, Brother Van Cott stated I was lately from the Sandwich Islands, Hawaii, and had resided there some 3 years. Brother Parley flung down his flail and, seating himself on the fence, began talking about the people of those far-off isles belonging to the house of Israel. A flood of light and truth flowed in a perpetual stream from his lips, and his whole soul was inspired with his theme. I soon lost all sight of his bare feet and dilapidated hat and general appearance, and was all imbued with the spirit of the great Latter-day Gathering promised by the Lord to his people, the house of Israel. Never in all my life had I heard such a discourse so full of inspiration and prophecy concerning the great work of the Lord in the latter days. I found my ideal apostle to be all that I had imagined, and far more. My goods having arrived, I brought a log house of my brother Horace Alexander. I bought a log house of Brother Horace Alexander, located just north of the east gate of the South Fort, and commenced shoemaking again, with Brother John White and O.F. Meade working for me. The winter was well spent. I never enjoyed myself so well in all my life. Although provisions were scarce and very dear, I paid $5 for a bushel of frostbitten buckwheat, the same for the frostbitten corn, $6 per gallon for frostbitten corn stalk molasses. Brother Simon Baker had a wooden mill near my door, in which he ground out his cornstalk juice and made it into molasses. With the squeaking of the old mill, the shouting of the boys, and the howling of the big gray wolves, I had not a chance to become lonesome. I do not know whether the wolves ever got a taste of that molasses, but if they did, I don't blame them for howling, for my lips smart whenever I think of it. There was no bolting cloth in operation at the mill at this time, located on City Creek. So we were, wow, he was on City Creek? Wow. So we were forced, as it were, to use a healthy diet, and I can truly say I never saw people so healthy as were the saints during the winter of 1848 to 49. I can't tell if that's tongue-in-cheek or not. We had meetings, parties, and schools well attended during the winter, and a great peace prevailed in the camps of Israel. The gifts of the gospel were abundantly poured out upon the saints in their meetings. Speaking in tongues and prophesying were the rule rather than the exception. Pride and love of the world seemed almost banished from among us. No one doubted the word of Brigham, the prophet of the Lord. We loved him, and he loved the saints with all his heart, and served them faithfully by night and by day. He seemed to have a capacity that nothing could escape, from locating of temples and directing their building down to the smallest matter of household affairs. It seemed the easiest matter in the world from him to take our poor emigrant saints and tell them how to fight the battle of life, so that in a very few years they could be found with nice and well-cultivated farms and comfortable surroundings. I have seen scores and hundreds of such families made so throughout Zion, by hearkening to the counsel of Brigham Young and his co-workers. During the winter, some became a little uneasy in the consequence of hard times, scarcity of provisions, and the general gloomy outlook. The glowing accounts which some in the battalion boys brought in concerning the gold fields which had been discovered in California helped to make these people restless. President Young, against all human foresight, boldly counseled the elders to stay at home and cultivate their farms, and promised that those who would do so would be able to buy out those who went to the mines. And he was right, by the way. I'm going to call that here for today, but next is Nauvoo Recollections. But, okay, I got words about this one. Wow, that's pretty amazing. I hope he had learned to overcome his weariness after having capsized his wagon, because he may have been an old sailor, and that might be why he thought, all is lost. I get that. Actually, that was actually pretty interesting insight he had. But it's a bit different when you're on land, but he made it here. I think it's pretty funny how the first thing he ever shot and to eat was a wolf, and it tasted so foul. And then he finished it off with clubbing it with his gun. Well, you live, you learn. Golly, just the thing that made me pause about the Indians attacking and murdering the brethren up in front. We live in such blessed times. We really do. And I would hate for society, and I think of all society, returning to something like that, where even just three men trying to find a place to sleep and rest becomes a danger. There are places that are like that, even now. And I think that's a tragedy. It's a tragedy because, I don't know, is it a sense of entitlement? It's easy to call it a sense of desperation. I think it's a cultivation of several things all at once. When you cultivate any type of allowance for just continually taking what you want when you want it as you need it, it just goes from there, and you can then divine any type of excuse you want for that kind of behavior. And heck, it may be true, but it's in allowance of that behavior that it becomes standard. And I think it's true of any culture, any of them at all. It doesn't matter what time period you're in, and it doesn't matter where you've come from before. And the reason I want to bring that up is because let's swing out the balance with the other part of when he arrived in Salt Lake. There's nothing but 3 adobe forts, and they started building up Salt Lake City from there. Now it's a beautiful place by all measures, full of trees and people, and just blessed with abundance. I mean, they had, you go anywhere else in Utah, just head south of Great Salt Lake and Utah counties. Just go down past Spanish Fork when you actually get away from the cities, and you look around and you see just the Great Basin scrub brush. That's what they were dealing with. That was it. When they first came in the valley, it would have been just the Great Salt Lake to one side, far off in the distance, and a few creeks here and there. So you may have a few sparse trees, tall, some prairie grasses, but a lot of scrub brush, and it's just wow. And that's what they would have had to deal with for making cattle and planting and ooh. So the reason I have words about them settling is not only was it harsh, but it was well done. The people living there, yeah, it was rough, it was hard. But when you have faith and a Zion-like people, you can get through a lot. And that trust in God, that trust in the apostles. I loved how he was able to meet Parley P. Pratt, and it inspired him. Despite the destitute look of the man as he had the old sectarian notion of having him be prim and proper. It's like, no, it's those who are filled with the Spirit are filled with the Spirit. I would never have it any other way. But of course, I'm part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where I'm like, yeah, we're rough and tumble, baby. Get in the dirt and prophesy the same day. So, but I grew up with ideas like that. I just, when you read Doctrine and Covenants and you read the stories around the prophet, you do get a sense, like, there's so many times Brother Joseph was, just in it with everyone, just like Brigham Young. They would be up to their elbows with work and help and assistance, and sometimes even playing with children. And the next day they'd be holding amazing sermons teaching on the nature of God and how we're his children and all this stuff. And you get a sense of this is the way it should be. Why? Because you're not putting it on some pedestal. It's just the knowledge of God that makes you stronger and better in so many ways. And it's ennobling. And so despite having to work barefoot, threshing beans and in a hat where your ears poke through, so what? The grand fact of the matter is that you're still children of God in all his different respects. He's made us wonderfully and gloriously to be able to adapt to so much, whether it be a life of pleasure and ease that we have around us in the modern day, or whether it's a land of harsh work and by the sweat of our brow we eat every single piece of our bread. That people were made healthy and strong through, having to live life right. All of that just sounds so wonderful. I know it's probably a good, hard struggle, but as long as people do their best and continue to have that trust, look at what happens. Like, that's my big thing, is faith. When they say faith is it's the evidence of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It's that principle of believing in things that are true, that are intangible, things like justice, things like mercy, things like trust. When you can have a vision of something that does not exist, and yet as you apply your life and behavior towards it, it builds up into being the thing that you had trust in. That's what faith is. I could go on for hours about that, but I love these LDS stories. So I'm glad you were able to bear with me and enjoy the happy trails from California to Utah. And may we all reflect on the blessings that got us to where we are right now. And may that trail always take us to the Lord. May his Spirit be with you. We'll see you.